You are here in the caregiver panel. This is the first time we're doing this, and we know it's a very important topic. It's not easy being a caregiver, I'm sure. And we've invited the panelists based on different perspectives. We wanted to have somebody who is a spouse, someone who is a child taking care of their parent, someone who is a past caregiver. We did have some other caregivers lined up as well, but due to travel issues, they weren't able to attend. So we do hope that you all find this helpful and know that there's also a caregiver support group where you can attend and learn from these folks who attend and share with one another, because you are a small group, because we know ALS is not, it's a very small community. So it's good that you all can find a common ground and be there for each other. So we do want to keep, we do have questions that are already prepared, and we are going to open the questions from the audience as well. But due to time, as you know, we only have 50 minutes because lunch does start at noon. We do want to keep the questions and any comments to, you know, as brief as possible, and I'm sure you all understand. So I'm very excited to have Dr. Alan Ribler attend and be our facilitator. So he's going to be the one reading the questions. Dr. Ribler, I'll give a little background on him. Dr. Ribler obtained his BS in psychology in 1978 from James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and worked for 3 years as a supervisor in a long-term residential treatment center for severely emotionally disturbed youths before returning to school for his graduate education. His experience with troubled youth made him aware of the prevalence of cognitive impairment in that population, and his doctoral program in applied cognitive psychology at Claremont Graduate University in Claremont, California, focused on cognitive disabilities and prepared him for training as a clinical neuropsychologist. Dr. Ribler has extensive training working with patients with developmental and acquired disabilities, as well as working with families in an inpatient rehabilitation units. He has always maintained a private practice, and since 2000 has worked full-time as a private practice psychologist. Presently, in addition to covering all medical units at Holy Cross Hospital, he is an adjunct professor of psychology at Nova Southeastern University, affiliate clinical faculty at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, and senior clinical instructor at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. Do you have any free time? He is a member of the American Psychological Association Divisions of Clinical Neuropsychology and Rehabilitation Psychology, the International Neuropsychology Society, the National Academy of Neuropsychology, and the International Dyslexia Society. Since its opening, Dr. Ribler has been a part of the team in the ALS clinic at the Phil Smith Neuroscience at Holy Cross Hospital. He is also a part of the team at Nova Southeastern ALS Clinic. Thank you, Dr. Ribler. And now I would like to introduce our caregiver panelists. And I have got beautiful bios, but I'm going to keep it brief for the sake of time. So Zulika Johnson. Zulika's father was diagnosed with ALS a year ago. And while they do receive a home attendant support through Florida's long-term care program, Zulika continues to help support him physically, manage his finances, and coordinate all aspects of his care. Bruce Jones. Bruce is caregiver for his beautiful wife, Cindy. He is also a Vietnam War era veteran who served as Air Hawk fire control technician at a Hawk missile site. After his service, he met his lovely wife, Anne, and they were soon married and have 2 beautiful children and now grandchildren. Bruce is an outdoors enthusiast, spending his leisure time doing lots of fun stuff in the water and occasionally paddleboarding with Anne. And in 2022, Anne, his most precious companion, was officially diagnosed with ALS, and Bruce became her full-time caregiver. As a result, he is no longer able to work, and that is one of the main challenges of dealing with ALS. It's expensive. Okay, and then we have, going on, Donna, Zulika, Pat, Cindy. Cindy's husband, Steve, was diagnosed with ALS in January 2020. They have been married for 25 years. Currently, he is fairly independent, but needs some help with grooming, and she prepares all her food and is her husband, Steve's primary caregiver. And then we have Pat. Pat's wife was diagnosed with ALS in 2019, and not only was he her husband of 50 years, but was also her primary caregiver. Rhea had no paid assistance, and so Pat assisted her with all her activities of daily living, and sadly, she lost her battle with ALS last May. We're so sorry, Pat. And Bonnie Green. So Bonnie, this is her fourth person, her husband, who she's been caregiving for. So she had three prior family members that she was the caregiver for, and she's been married to her husband since 2011, and he was recently diagnosed with ALS in December, and she is his full-time caregiver. And she's had a very exciting life, and now she dedicates her life to caregiving. I think that is your second calling. So this is our caregiver panel. We thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. And now I'd like to bring up Dr. Alan Ribler.
Thank you, Tina. So I've also been a caregiver. My mom, when she was dying from breast cancer, my wife's a breast cancer survivor. And at Relay of Life with the American Cancer Society, we honor the caregivers too. So professionally, personally, we have to pay attention to the people who are doing the caregiving. We're all members, you're all members of a club that if somebody asked us, do we want to join, we probably wouldn't want to, but you know, we're like the can in the stack of cans in the grocery store that if you pull out that can on the bottom, everything falls apart. And caregivers are that most essential part of taking care of all the people in our lives. So I have a bunch of questions that were given to me, but before I do that, I have props. So in our clinic, caregivers get these self-help or self-care prescriptions. So everybody here, because if we don't take care of the caregivers, like I said, everything falls apart. There's more here if you want them. So I have a bunch of questions that were given to me, but I want to start with a couple of things that I've noticed in our clinic working with families, spouses, siblings, sometimes, rarely, kids come in, but sometimes adult children of the people in our clinic. And there are a couple of themes I see. One has to do with the sense of helplessness in the face of something like ALS. I know we as clinicians and researchers feel helpless. We would like to have a fix, but we don't. So I want to put to the panel first, how do you deal with that sense of helplessness that comes with something that doesn't have a fix? Go ahead.
Well, when Stephen was first diagnosed, it was chaos in my mind. It just was. And I know a lot of you can relate to that. Who wants to take care of somebody? I did not. My husband raised me as a princess. So I go from princess to caregiver. I did not like it one bit. And I remember one night standing there in the kitchen peeling his tangerine, being angry because he should be able to peel his own damn tangerine, right? I was not gracious about it at all. No, I mean, I did not act that way to him, but in my brain and with my friends, thank God I had good friends because they listened to me and they told me the way I was feeling was okay and it was normal. But I didn't like it. I did not like myself because I always thought if I was presented with some sort of a major challenge that I would just be graceful, and I was not. So that's kind of my story.
So I have a 5-month-old and a 4-year-old, and I think that they help me with the helplessness or the hopelessness, right? Because I can't not have hope because I need to show up for them and my husband too, obviously. But I would say that if there is something in your life as a caregiver, or if you yourself have ALS, like look to that spot of light, right? Whether it's children in your family or a relationship or just something that you enjoy. It's really hard because I get frustrated with mostly my 4-year-old because she's 4, and so every day is a struggle. But I try really, really, really hard to like find those moments of joy and include my dad in those moments of joy to kind of get through those moments of hopelessness and feeling helpless. Like there's really nothing else you could do but to just find those glimmers of hope.
Someone told me once that where there's a will, there's a way. Won't mention any names. So far, that's worked for me, but mostly through the strength of my wife. She is my life, and so far, between that and friends, we've been able to meet all our needs.
Well, at first, I just swore a lot because I was like, this cannot be happening again. So pretty much I just dove in head first. I come from a television media background, and so I started researching. And every website that was given to me, I've read. My husband has ALS and FTD with the genetic C9 mutation. So we've kind of had the double, triple whammy. And so I pretty much have attended and joined 16 support groups. I have pretty much 2 or 3 a day that I go to virtually. And then I have read over 110 websites that are either ALS or FTD related. And I just feel that knowledge is power. And in order to keep it moving, because you have to as a caregiver, you cannot break down. My time to break down is after he's safe in bed. And then that's my time. But other than that, you know, you put on the face and you have to find those snippets of joy in your life, and you weave those together as a tapestry to hold on to and just keep it moving. So.
I think we all recognize on this panel, we were not prepared for a diagnosis. But once that diagnosis hits, we begin to realize and experience the hopelessness, doctor, that you referred to. And in my case, the hopelessness really it was, in a sense, a surprise that I would feel all that hopeless because I wasn't prepared. But then I realized through a deeper faith in God, it helped me understand that I'm not alone, and that my faith would be there for me. And that's what brought me through this, because I realized this life is not all there is. And so that was my greatest strength, my greatest hope. to combat that hopelessness.
So you each found ways to empower yourself, and I bring it up because actually Dr. Kavanaugh brought it up in the last session, if any of you were lucky enough to be there, how we don't just protect our children, we try to protect our loved ones, and the patients are trying to protect us too by not sharing what's really going on. And I found that when you allow somebody in, it empowers both of you. That when you can do something for your dad, you feel empowered, whereas if you're just on the sideline and he's saying, no, I'm going to do it myself, just, what do I do? You're just watching. So that teamwork, which we all have in the multidisciplinary clinics, but you and your families are also part of the team, and you're a team together. And I've found that that's one of the things that empowers people, which leads me to my next question is, how do you deal with somebody who has ALS who really doesn't want to accept any help? They want to do it. Oh, that's resonating. Okay. So that's my next question for the panel. You have somebody who would just rather do it the way they've always done it, and you know that they really can't. Okay, I think we have an order established here.
Well, my husband is definitely that way. And when we go to clinic, that's when I find out about his struggles. And so when we were very new in the diagnosis, I would be, well, for one thing, he still has a little bit of strength in his hands, but he can't take a milk carton, a regular milk carton. So I would hurry up when he wasn't watching and make sure that I poured the milk carton into one with a handle. So I did a lot of things behind the scenes because that was all I knew to do. And he didn't even, I don't think, know that I was doing that, right? But that's how I chose to handle that. And I remember listening to him talk about, I do remember this one other thing. I remember telling him, because every now and then we do tell each other our feelings, but it's not easy for him to do. And I remember telling him how jealous I get when I see people our age that are walking around and, I look at the person's legs and the legs are, the right size. Well, that was something I shouldn't have said, because now he says, oh, do my legs look really bad? No, not at all, But those are moments that I remember. And it is really challenging when you're with somebody who is always taking care of me, and now he needs taken care of. And I just have to add that I did get to the point where I'm not angry and resentful anymore. I do consider it a privilege now, but it took a while to get to that point. And I just wanted to share that, because if any of you are feeling angry and resentful, it's so perfectly normal, and it is okay. And the kindness of people will make it so much better. Those are the silver linings that I have found. I don't know if I answered your question or not. I usually veer off.
Everything you said was helpful.
Oh, thank you.
Anybody else about? Yeah. Okay, because you've got a dad.
Yes, I've got one, thankfully. And I will preface this by saying that my dad was diagnosed in August of 2023, and he is now wheelchair bound and needs assistance with everything. So things progressed really quickly, which also forced my dad to accept help really quickly. So I didn't have that much of a challenge, or we don't have that challenge anymore now, because he realizes he just simply can't. But at the beginning, I really just tried to allow him to kind of figure it out on his own, because I wanted to do so much, right? Like, sit down, don't clean, right? But my dad is a neat freak, and that was his joy in life, was to clean. So when he moved in with me, he wanted to help me clean, but I didn't want him to fall. But there were ways that he could still help me clean, so I allowed him to clean the kitchen counters, and like he can hold on to the counter while he's cleaning them, right? So like not completely taking his ability away from him before it was actually taken away from him. So allowing him the freedom to try things, and he did fall, right? Like, and he learned through those falls, and so did we as a family. So if there is a way that you could allow your family member to kind of learn on their own, it's really hard when you want to just do everything for them. But I think that that helped him and I. And then he trusted me when I would step in and say, you can't do that anymore. Because he knew that if he really could, I would have let him done it on his own.
Anybody else?
Ours is a little different in that my husband is from Finland, and so Finns are very stoic people in general, so they don't talk a lot to begin with. So there's not a dialogue of what do you want. It's sort of a forced dialogue that we have. And now with the FTD, it's like I live with 3 different people. I never know which one I'm going to wake up with. I have my husband, and then I have the guy whose body is failing him, and then I have the FTD guy who we don't really like. And he can be kind of a jerk, but he can also be very childlike. And so Sam is now also reverting to his natural language, so he speaks Finglish to me as part of his dementia. Luckily, I understand it. But there's blessings and curses with that, because most of you have your person who's in the body that's failing. But then I have the person whose brain is also not aware of their body failing. So when he was falling 5 times a day, he didn't always understand why. So I'm not sure which path is worse, but there's a certain blessing in the fact that he's not aware of the things that the ALS does to the body.
Yes, my wife was a little stubborn as well because she ran the house and did a great job at it. As a matter of fact, I seldom was able to mow the lawn because she was out doing it before I needed it. But so as things got worse and she became a little more clumsy, decided, well, let her do as much as she can. But that's not always the best thing. As we learned, we ended up in the ER 3 times within about 8 months. And falling's not good, hitting your head, the ALS. So we figured out new ways of doing it, and she still does a lot of that. I have to mow the lawn now, though. But so it looks different.
I've retired from that myself. I have somebody else do it.
Yeah. So anyway, she just has a different way of doing it. I assist, and we've made compromises. And she no longer does the counter surfing that you were talking about. That's it.
So do you find, like I do, that an awful lot of people identify themselves with what they can do? What I can do physically, I can go to work, I can clean the house, I can cook, I can do all these things. And a lot of our identity disappears if we can't perform physically, cognitively. So I encourage people to rethink how they identify themselves, more according to, like you were saying, from your faith, you get a value system. I am honest, I'm hardworking, I'm loyal, I'm kind, I'm forgiving. And those things really transcend whatever it is we can do. So even if you're unable to walk or do anything else, you can still be loyal and kind and thoughtful and forgiving. And I tell patients they can always do the most important thing that there is to do. Anybody know what that is? You got it. You weren't in my clinic. How did you know that? She said love. If we can't do anything else, we can still love. And I don't think anybody ever loved you because you could cut the grass, or you could clean the house, or you could, or remember. I see a lot of dementia patients. I say nobody ever loved you because you could remember. In fact, people may have loved you because you knew how to forget. I have some other questions here. So I don't know what the time's, okay, we're good. Let's talk about burnout as a caregiver. Because I think it's something that really, if it doesn't affect everybody, it may. It's a risk of being a caregiver. So what do you do to recharge your batteries or how do you recognize the signs of burnout in yourself?
Medication.
Okay. So, it's a really good point because medication can be really helpful, but if you're being treated for anxiety with certain medications, it might make you unavailable to do your caregiving. Especially the benzodiazepines can make you sleepy, and some people obviously self-medicate with alcohol, which we don't really want. That's going to make you unavailable. But medication can be one of those tools in your toolbox. How do you recognize?
Well, for me, when this came around for the fourth time, I had already been through bereavement counseling and everything the first, second, and third times. So I just went ahead and said, okay, I need to be on an antidepressant because I could find myself.
I did that too, by the way.
Already sliding down that slippery slope. And so, it was a way of still grasping everything I needed to deal with, getting myself organized, but at the same time, the downside is it doesn't allow you a lot of emotion for crying. It took me like 6 months before I ever cried over the situation. So, but I think you just have to speak with your doctors candidly about what you need to put in your arsenal that's going to give you the best you to get up and do it again tomorrow. Because no matter how bad today is today, I often post, when I'm complaining and whining, that I'll say, but I'll be better tomorrow.
So optimism helps.
Well, it's just you reset. Each day you have to come in fresh. So, yeah.
I would add to that, you have to recognize the signs of burnout.
Yeah, so what are those for you?
Sometimes it's just negative thinking. Sometimes it's physical, that you're just exhausted, obviously. And then you have to think, what's going to combat that? So, yes, positive thinking for one. Again, I go back to that deeper faith. It's just a joy that that has to come from inside, and not just expect external things to pump you up. You have to receive it from some other place, and then you got to take care of yourself. You caregivers have to take care of yourself. You are the key, in a sense, to making your the person you're giving the care to receive the best care possible. I think I attribute the people that we went to, the clinics that we went to, the Zoom meetings, support groups that we had that helped me as a caregiver stay on top of it. And those were absolutely critical.
For me, the signs of burnout for me were I got depressed, but I couldn't act depressed, because that's not my personality. So I would just go around my regular life and, that everything's great. Now, with certain people, I might cry or I might say exactly what was going on. And I gained a lot of weight in the first 2 years because I wanted something. I don't drink or smoke anymore, so I felt like I needed something. But then I started getting physically ill from eating crap that wasn't good for me. And so I went back on my food plan and felt better. I feel, back to 90%. And for me, I need to exercise, stay on my food, and reach out to the people that I can. And I'll never forget, in the very beginning, I would go, Steve was still and he still is ambulatory, and I would go to my massage therapist, and I had this massive, massive back pain. And I was on the table, and I finally broke down. And she said, let it go. Because we'd been together for a long time. Let it go, let it go. And then the back pain went away. So I wasn't taking care of myself and feeling my feelings. I was just going from one activity to the next and trying to take care of things that were going on. And I was just holding all my feelings in. So it's very, very important to me now to just do the very best I can with the self-care and do as much as I can. And it's so important. And we do have a lot to do and a lot going on, but we still must take care of ourselves.
Do any of you experience that emotional distancing or detachment, the irritability, that everything just seems like it's wrong? I mean, that's in the healthcare setting, when we see healthcare providers who are stepping back, they're referring to patients by their diagnosis rather than their name, and just not being emotionally connected. Any of you have experienced that?
I feel like I experienced that to some extent. I feel a lot of guilt most days because I do have help for my dad. It's a blessing and a curse that my dad is low income because it makes things challenging, but it also allows him to qualify for a lot of the programs. And so we get someone that comes in every day and helps him. And so I don't have to bathe him anymore. I don't have to brush his teeth. I don't have to feed him. Sometimes I choose to if I want to give him some dessert just to have that connection with him, but I don't have to. And sometimes I feel guilty that I'm not doing it, or that I don't want to do it, and that I prefer our caregiver to do it for us. But I have to do everything else.
Well,
So
I want to point out,
Yeah.
you don't have to. You're making that loving choice for your dad. Like all of you are who are caregivers, you don't have to. I mean, what's going to happen if you don't is your loved one is not going to get the care that you would give them. But it is a really loving choice to love isn't, flowers on Valentine's Day. Love is when the stuff hits the fan and your loved one steps up and is there. That's true love. So, good job.
I guess it doesn't really feel like a choice. But I think it's.
But it is, I
Yeah.
mean, if you think about it, there are people who don't. We've had people who spouses disappear.
Yeah, that's true.
Children are out of state, they're not coming home to help out. We see all of that.
yeah.
But you're not. You're stepping up. This is the hardest thing, I think, one of the hardest things there is to do.
Yeah. But I guess to the point is that I've tried to find ways to still find connections with my dad. Because now that I don't have to do a lot of that care, like I try to find ways to spend time with him in a different way. Like yesterday, I also work from home, which is a blessing. And I just stopped working at like 2, and I sat down with him on the bed. And we just talked, and he wanted ice cream, and I got one too. And then I just fed him, and I fed myself, and we just had ice cream. And we cried, and we talked about ALS things, because I hate it. Like, everything we talk about is like ALS. Like, what appointment, what visit, what's next, what's happening, what's the, like, it's very rare. I started now just talking to him about work, because I'm actually working again. So I'm like, well, here's how I'm doing my job. And I don't know if it makes any sense to you, but I just wish I had something else to talk to him about. And so I try to make a point of doing that, and like telling him what's going on with my 5-month-old and how many diapers of poop she had today, and like, you know, just trying to find other things. So that's how I'm able to cope with that, like, distancing. And it's so hard that, like, I feel like the parent now. It just sucks. But, you know, got to try to find a way to still feel like a child.
Yeah.
Like, he's still my daddy, so.
It does suck, but that's not all it is.
Yeah. It's really hard.
Yes.
I get very angry.
Okay. Anybody else? So I have a question here about what you just mentioned, which is role reversals. Tina, just come up and take the mic away from me. I'm not keeping time here. And you spoke about role reversals in your family too, where Ann used to do certain things, and now you've taken them on, and so you have new job descriptions. I think that's kind of universal. We have expectations when we're part of a family. Everybody has, you know, their job description, and then things come along that move the goalposts. Let's see here. So you mentioned 10 support groups. 16? Okay, so if you were going to recommend to our audience here any that are particularly helpful, who they may only have time for 1 or 2.
Well, obviously, we belong with the ALS groups, and then we also do the IM ALS support group. Then there's the AFTD Association, they have one. And then there's the Compassionate Care ALS group. There's the Ride for Life ALS group. There is the Hilarity for Charity, and that's for mostly all kinds of dementias. There's also one called End the Legacy, and those are for anyone that has the genetic components of ALS or FTD. So if you've done the genetic testing and you have a gene, because there's 40 mutations now, you can be a part of their group. They're very big on science, research, and advocacy, especially on the Hill and such. And then I'm trying to think of some of the others.
That's probably a good short
Is
list.
there's Team Gleason's too.
So one of the things that's come up is how we're not really good about talking about difficult topics, which is interesting because when we look at the research about families coping with chronic disease, there are a couple of things that seem to point to good coping or good outcomes. So for us, good outcomes are quality of life, or at the end stage, quality of death. And one is talking about everything. You know, we're going back to trying to protect our loved ones by not saying things that might be upsetting. But it's really not good coping. And the other thing is to continue to engage in what you would normally do, making whatever adaptations you need you need to make to continue that. So my background's in rehabilitation. In rehabilitation, we have goals. There are barriers to goals, and then we find workarounds, whether it's equipment, whether it's redefining the goals. So I know you've probably all done that. You've been down that road, making those adaptations. But at a certain point, I think there's some resistance to, let's say, using a walker or getting the feeding tube or using a communication device, that it's almost like giving into the disease is what I hear from a lot of patients. Have you had that experience?
Whenever my husband's a veteran, so whenever we'd go to the VA for our clinic, well, when can we get you fitted for a wheelchair? Oh, no, we don't need a wheelchair, no. And so the last time we went, because first of all, I thought, oh my goodness, if we get a wheelchair, I'm just gonna be sobbing and I won't be able to stop myself. And so at the last one, Rebecca, our PT, she said, my husband said, well, my back's been hurting a lot lately. And she said, well, do you sit on a recliner? Yes, I do. Well, you know, if we got you a wheelchair, you could just sit on it all day in your house. And I just looked at her and I said, you're really sneaky, Rebecca. But it's true. We went to get fitted for the wheelchair. And I tend to be quite the optimist. No, he's never going to need one. I'm just going to keep feeding him the right food. He's going to keep walking. Now, we know that's all BS, but that's what I want to believe. So by the time we got to the VA and got fitted for the wheelchair, it was just part of the process, and it was okay. This is what we need right now. And if you do need it, it'll be right here if you need it. And I make all the doctors say, please say if, not when, because that helps me emotionally, and it helps my husband too. So that's my experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, and your therapist probably also talked to you about energy conservation?
Oh, all the time.
And
yes.
You know, you only have X amount of energy. I mean, you could spend it trying to walk everywhere. Or you can ride. You can spend a lot of energy continuing to chew food and spend your whole day trying to get enough calories to stay alive, or you can get a feeding tube and supplement and just enjoy the foods you really like and have that other energy for the things you really want to do. And I tell them also, you know, falling is really bad. And it's bad enough to have ALS. You don't want a broken hip on top of it, because then, you know, the game may be over. Tina, how are we?
I'd say maybe 2 more questions. We have about 2 minutes, so if you can keep it.
Well, I'm not going to ask you something. I'm going to turn it over to you if you have anything, any pearls that you really want to share with the audience here. Something that you think would be really helpful for the folks listening.
I would like to just say, I remember when we heard at the very first support group meeting we had, something about voice banking. And so I thought, wow, we're never going to need that. And by the time we needed it, it was too late. So I would suggest to you, do that. Make sure you, if that's important to you, to preserve that voice, get it done now, because it will come faster than you think. And like the wheelchairs and all the other assisted devices, get them ahead of time. Feeding tube. People don't want that feeding tube, but sometimes they wait too long and you can't have it. Well, I believe that it prolonged the life of my wife at least 3 years because she had the feeding tube. So, and she didn't mind it. She did it, she fed herself through her own feeding tube at the beginning until she couldn't do it. And then it was my turn. That was our time together, 5 or 6 times a day. So be proactive in your thoughts and you're going to hear a lot of advice when you go to clinic and your PTOTs. Take it seriously. You'll be happy you did.
I'll second the voice banking thing. We did that probably within the first 2 months of his diagnosis. And the fact that he had the FTD component and is reverting to language, we had to do voice banking in 2 languages. So that is possible. I would just say educate yourself as much as you possibly can. Every website that is given to you, try to go through, then you can find out which ones have, free equipment to offer, which ones have grants, which ones provide extra care. I've even gotten a grant for attorney's fees for our estate planning and end-of-life decisions. So there's stuff out there. You just have to do the research. And you do need to have those conversations. I mean, we've already had a lot of conversations about what his wishes are for the end. And we just make it a part of a regular conversation, though. It's not something heavy, but, it's just something that you have to talk about, sort of like what's for dinner and, oh, by the way, do you want a feeding tube? So you can slide
Wouldn't this
them
be
in there.
easier with a feeding tube?
Yeah, it's sort of like, what would you eat if you had a feeding tube, or.
Or I don't feel like cooking. How about getting a feeding tube?
Well, we don't do that. But, when you're a caregiver too, and especially with this kind of disease where there's not a lot of good news on the horizon yet, life becomes very small. And so you have to really pick and choose your battles. Is it really worth arguing with that customer service rep?
Yes.
Yes. Or do you want to just have ice cream for dinner? Yes. I mean, we just keep it simple. If we're not hungry, we don't eat. If he doesn't want to eat what we're fixing, then we'll have cake for dinner. Or, you have to enjoy the time you have now. And especially with him, there's going to come a time where he won't maybe even know who I am because of the FTD side of it. And so we're trying to hold on to the moments of joy now and make the memories now.
Anybody else? Pearls.
Yes,
I just want to point out, Ann's here, so.
okay, that's why I've been very careful, very careful. No, but some time ago, Ann thought it'd be a good idea if we got a Hoyer lift. I'm like, we don't need a Hoyer lift, right? But we got it, and it sat in the other bedroom for a couple of months, and then one of the times I told you about that she fell, and I couldn't get her up. Luckily, we had the Hoyer lift. I went and got the Hoyer lift and was able to get her back in her wheelchair on her feet.
Yeah,
Back in
I
the
would,
wheelchair. So it was, otherwise it would have been the fire department.
Well, that's not a bad idea, by
No.
the way.
No.
Don't be too proud to call 911. And I would just add to whatever, I'm being told lunch is about to be served. So make really good use of your multidisciplinary teams. I tell them that we work for them, and I have a suspicion the other clinics work the same way. You're in charge. We're there for what you tell us you need, and then it's our job to deliver. So be assertive, be advocates for yourselves, and keep doing the really hard, wonderful, loving work that you're doing. And those of you who are receiving, just be gracious about it and say thanks. I don't want to hear I can do it myself.
Thank you, Dr. Ribler, and thank you to our caregiver panel. So before everybody heads out to lunch, I just want to say that we have a caregiver support group that meets every month, and it meets the second Wednesday of the month at 2 o'clock. You're going to gain this type of knowledge from these very people that are on the group as well. It's a great space for you all as caregivers to meet, to talk to one another. You know what you each are going through. And so there may be questions that you all have. You can run into these folks at the symposium. You can join our caregiver group, and I really encourage you to do so. And as they mentioned earlier, there is also a nationwide caregiver group for women, and there's a nationwide caregiver group for men, and it also is virtual. So there are options for you folks. A lot of the resources that Bonnie referenced, speak to your care services managers. We know what's out there. We know the other nonprofits. We work together. We each have a piece of that puzzle that creates one beautiful picture for you. We're here to help. We're not medical professionals, but we know who to talk to. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If we haven't spoken to you, which we should have, but if we haven't, give us a call. Send us an email, and we'll get back to you. We're here to we work for you, as Dr. Ribler said. So thank you for being here. We are going to have lunch now in the International Ballroom 1 and 2, and then we're going to meet back here for the veterans. We're going to have a veterans presentation at 1:30 back here in this room. So thank you all for coming, and enjoy lunch.